Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we are finishing the final part of Emerson's journal collection number 24. He has just finished his long vacation in Europe, and he's setting back overseas to America. And it is September 5th where we pick up with him as they have just set off from Liverpool back to Boston, actually to New York, and then he would take a transportation to Boston and then to his, I think it was his mother's house, but we'll get there soon enough. Anyway, just a quick update. He is age 30 during this time. The year is 1833, and like I said, it's Thursday, September 5th, and he is on board. I believe it's called the New York. New York is actually the name of this ship. There's maybe 15, 16 other passengers with him besides the crew. With that said, I'll go ahead and get started. Thursday, September 5th. Calm, fine day. This morn I saw the last lump of England receding without the least regret. I saw, too, for the first time a piece of Ireland. It was the Wicklow Mountains. As I came down the waterside in Liverpool, I noticed the announcement of the wind at Holyhead. Quote, "At Holyhead, northeast wind blowing fresh." End quote. This communication was telegraphed from Holyhead 60 miles from Liverpool. Noble Docks, heard Mr. Yeats preach on Sunday the best sermon I heard in England. Be clothed with humility. After service I stood waiting for him to come out, when he spoke to me at my side. "Oh," said I, surprised, "how do you do, Mr. Wardlaw? I mean Mr. Yeats." Is it not strange that every book begins with "No science deserves more attention than"? Whether astronomy, geology, civil history, geometry, algebra, commerce, or what not, even wise Herschel, after a savor flourishing, begins with "No science." We were towed out of Liverpool harbor by steamboat. Admirable contrivance for ports in deep bays like this, or Philadelphia, or Baltimore, where they might lie weeks waiting to get out with a wind fair for a voyage all the time. At one moment the boat and the ship had nearly struck. Every ship, every man has all but struck, been within an inch of destruction 1,000 times. It is such a narrow line that divides an awkward act from the finish of gracefulness. Every man eats well alone. Let a stranger come in, and he misses his mouth, and spills his butterboat, and fails of finding the joint in carving, and that by so little. I wrote above something concerning the golden mean wherein grace and safety lies. In peaceful pursuits, in cities, we do not consider how great is the distance between danger and death. A man in his parlor thinks that to meet a lion in the desert, or to stumble over an alligator in wading through a watered savanna, is certain destruction. They who are familiar with these rencontres think no such thing, and in that discrimination their safety lies. See the story of the Indian girl who put out the cayman's eyes, and in the accurate Dampier, the account of the Irishman whose knee was seized by an alligator. He quietly waited till the animal loosened his teeth to take a new and surer hold, and when it did so, snatched away his knee, interposing the butt end of his gun in its stead, which the animal seized so firmly that it was jerked out of the man's hand and carried off. See also the marvelous expedient of righting the ship when lying in the trough of the sea, by going up the fore shrouds and spreading out their coats. Early English Navigation Cabinet Library. When the French fleet under Count d'Estrées was wrecked, those of the ordinary seamen who got ashore died of fatigue and famine, while those who had been buccaneers were wrecked here, being used to such accidents, lived merrily. For they kept a gang by themselves, and watched when the ships broke up to get the goods that came out of them. And though much was staved against the rocks, yet abundance of wine and brandy floated over the reef where they waited to take it up. In the selecting unknown wild fruits they were guided by birds, freely eating whatever kind had been pecked. Friday the 6th. Fair, fine wind, still in the channel, off the coast of Ireland, but not in sight of land. This morning 37 sail in sight. I like my book about nature, and wish I knew where and how I ought to live. God will show me. I am glad to be on my way home, yet not so glad as others, and my way to the bottom I could find perchance with less regret, for I think it would not hurt me, that is, the ducking or drowning. Saturday, the 7th. Gentle airs, wind still, and what is perhaps good, no events. At 12 o'clock, south of Cape Clear. Sunday, the 8th. The solitary keeper of the lighthouse of the Smalls in the English Channel, which stands on 3 pillars of cast iron, the waves washing through them. There were 2, one sickened and died. The other kept his body, lest they should say he murdered him, until somebody came to the spot, and the body was quite rotten. Bread must be well mixed to keep sweet, a man well tempered to keep his spirit clear. Quote, "A rum place," says an Englishman. It is pleasant to know that our ship is renowned for its fast sailing. Captain Hoxie tells me that in 3 successive days he sailed in his ship 275, 273, and 276 miles, equal 824. Astronomy, I think Herschel promises everything. It refers me to a higher state than I now occupy. I please myself rather with contemplating the penumbra of the thing than the thing itself, but no moralities now, the good, the holy day. At sea, Sunday, September 8th. I wrote above my conviction that the great men of England are singularly ignorant of religion. They should read Norton's preface to his new book, who has stated the fact well. Carlyle almost grudges the poor peasant his Calvinism. Must I not admit in the same moment that I have practical difficulties myself? I see or believe in the wholesomeness of Calvinism for thousands and thousands. I would encourage, or rather I would not discourage, their scrupulous religious observances. I dare not speak lightly of usages which I omit. And so with this hollow obeisance to things I do not myself value. I go on not pestering others with what I do believe, and so I am open to the name of a very loose speculator, a faint, heartless supporter of a frigid and empty theism, a man of no rigor of manners, of no vigor of benevolence. Ah me, what hope of reform, what hope of communicating religious light to benighted Europe, if they who have what they call the light are so selfish and timid and cold, and their faith so unpractical, and, in their judgment, so unsuitable for the middling classes. I know not, I have no call to expound, but this is my charge plain and clear, to act faithfully upon my own faith, to live by it myself, and see what a hearty obedience to it will do. Carlyle deprecated the state of a man living in rebellion, as he termed it, with no worship, no reverence for anybody. Himself, he said, would worship anyone who showed him more truth. And Unitarians, he thought, were a tame, limitary people who were satisfied with their theistic system and never made great attainments, and capable of depth of sentiment. Back again to myself, I believe that the error of religionists lies in this, that they do not know the extent or the harmony or the depth of their moral nature, that they are clinging to a little positive verbal formal versions of the moral law, and very imperfect versions too, while the infinite laws, the laws of the law, the great circling truths, whose only adequate symbol is the material laws, the astronomy, etc., are all unobserved, and sneered at when spoken of as frigid and insufficient. I call Calvinism such an imperfect version of the moral law. Unitarianism is another, and every form of Christian and of pagan faith in the hands of incapable teachers is such a version. On the contrary, in the hands of a true teacher, the falsehoods, the pitilessness, the sectarianisms of each are dropped, and the sublimity and the depth of the original is penetrated and exhibited to men. I say also that all that recommends each of these established systems of opinion to men is so much of this moral truth as is in them, and by the instructive selection of the preacher is made to shine forth when the system is assailed. And because of this one bottom, it is that the eminent men of each church, Socrates, Akempis, Fenelon, Butler, Penn, Swedenborg, Channing, think and say the same thing. But the men of Europe will say, expound. Let us hear what it is that it is to convince the faithful and at the same time the philosopher. Let us hear this new thing. It is very old. It is the old revelation, that perfect beauty is perfect goodness. It is the development of the wonderful congruities of the moral law of human nature. Let me enumerate a few of the remarkable properties of that nature. A man contains all that is needful to his government within himself. He is made a law unto himself. All real good or evil that can befall him must be from himself. He only can do himself any good or any harm. Nothing can be given to him or taken from him, but always there is a compensation. There is a correspondence between the human soul and everything that exists in the world. More properly, everything that is known to man. Instead of studying things without the principles of them, all may be penetrated unto within him. Every act puts the agent in a new condition. The purpose of life seems to be to acquaint a man with himself. He is not to live to the future as described to him, but to live to the real future by living to the real present. The highest revelation is that God is in every man. Monday, September 9th. The road from Liverpool to New York, as they who have traveled it well know, is very long, crooked, rough, and eminently disagreeable. Good company even, heaven's best gift, will scarce make it tolerable. 4 meals a day is the usual expedient, and the wretchedness of the expedient will show the extremity of the case. And much wine and porter, these are the amusements of wise men in this sad place. The purest wit may have a scurvy stomach. The letter bag is our captain's best passenger. He neither eats nor drinks, and yet pays, at least in Liverpool, a passenger's fare. Captain Hoxie tells me that he usually carries between 4,000 and 5,000 letters each way. At the New York post office they count his letters and pay him 2 cents for every one. At Liverpool 2 pence. The last time he received in Liverpool £39 for them. Fraser's Magazine states that Lord Clarendon wrote a sketch of the life of Charles Cotton, father of Charles Cotton, doubtless the translator of Montaigne. I have never seen it. Liverpool, September 10th. I have heard the proverb that there is no evil but can speak. Especially in these days when every sentiment and every class of opinions and interests has its organ and voice, is there no evil but speaks. Also consider that every week Europe sends this voice of all of its opinions and interests by its periodical press or occasional works into America. It follows that one can better know what transpires there by reading here with more accuracy and in a shorter time than by the slow and partial method of personal observation and traveling. It seems to argue great simplicity, then, for a traveler to undertake to inform us upon Europe because he has seen it. So it would. You have learned more by contenting yourself with this abbreviated, tabulated method. I will then say what I have to say, merely in confirmation of your results, and by no means pretending to state new views or theories. The whole creation groaneth until now, waiting for that which shall be revealed. Loud winds last night, but the ship swam like a waterfowl betwixt the mountains of sea. The wise man in the storm prays God, not for safety from danger, but for deliverance from fear. It is the storm within which endangers him, not the storm without. But it is a queer place to make one's bed in, the hollows of this immense Atlantic. Mazeppa-like, we are tied to this side of these wild horses of the northwest. But this rough breath of heaven will blow me home at last, as once it blew me to Gibraltar. The powerful trumpet of the last finds a response to all its stops in the bottom of the heart of the men in the cabin. Friday, September 13th. The sea to us is but a lasting storm. How it blows, how it rocks. My sides are sore with rolling in my berth. The coverlet is not wide enough that a man should wrap himself in it. It is only strange that with such a sea and wind and rain, such wild, distressful, noisy nights, no harm should befall us. We have torn a sail and lost a hen-coop and its inmates, but the bulwarks are firm, and I often hear of the sea breaking the bulwarks of ships. Captain Fox, who went in 14 days from Liverpool to Boston, slept in the cable tier to keep the mate from taking in sail. Running in for Boston Harbor, it was very misty, and the passengers besought him to lay to in vain. Presently the man before cried, "A sail!" "Pooh!" said Captain Fox, "'tis the lighthouse starboard helm." It was the light, and he ran round it and came to an anchor within the bay. What a machine is the ship, changing so fast from the state of a butterfly all wing to the shape of a log all spar. Poor Ireland! They told a story of an Irish boy at school asking a holiday to go to the market town. What to go for? To see uncle hanged. Monday, 16th. Gale and calm, pitch and ruck, merrily swim we, the sun shines bright. The mate says they took up, about where we are now, a year ago, the crew of the Leonidas, a Portland vessel loaded with salt, which sprang a leak. The captain would not leave the ship after putting quadrant and compass and his own things in a boat, and saw the boat leave the ship. One of this line of packets struck an island of ice, and the whole company, with 35 passengers, escaped in the boat. Dull, stormy day yesterday. I kept Sunday with Milton and a Presbyterian magazine. Milton says if ever any was ravished with moral beauty, he is the man. It occurred with sad force how much we are bound to be true to ourselves, the old string, because we are always judged by others as ourselves, and not as those whose example we would plead. A reads in a book the praise of a wise man, who could unbend and make merry, and so he tosses off his glass, whilst round him are malicious eyes watching his guzzling and fat-eating. The truth is, you can't find any example that will suit you, nor could if the whole family of Adam should pass in procession before you, for you are a new work of God. Time and hour wear through the roughest day. What follows is a poem, it says here, from a verse book, and it is provisionally entitled Improvisations. America, my country, can the mind embrace in its affections realms so vast, unpeopled, yet the land of men to be, has the great oceans that wash thee enclose? 'Tis an ambitious charity that makes its arms meet round, and yet the sages say the preference of our own cabin to a stranger's wealth, the insidious love and hate that curls the lip of the frank Yankee in the tenements of ducal and of royal rank abroad, his supercilious ignorance of heraldry and ceremony, and his tenacious recollection amid the colored treasuries of art that circle the Louvre or the Pitti House, Tuscany's unrivaled boast, of the brave steamboats of New York, the Boston Common, and the Hadley farms washed by Connecticut. Yea, if the ruddy Englishman speak true of the vast Roman Church, and underneath the frescoed sky of its majestic dome, the American will count the cost and build the shrine with dollars in his head, and all he asks arrived in Italy. Has the star-bearing squadron left Leghorn? Land without history, land lying all in the plain daylight of the temperate zone, thy plain acts without exaggeration done in day. Thy interests contested by their manifest good sense, and their own clothes without the ornament of bannered army harnessed in uniform. Land where, and 'tis in Europe counted a reproach, where man asks questions for which man was made. A land without nobility, or wigs, or debt, no castles, no cathedrals, and no kings. Land of the forest. That is the end of the poem. And Emerson adds a question mark here below it, unrelated to the poem. In this world, if a man sits down to think, he is immediately asked if he has the headache. At sea, September 17th. Yesterday I was asked what I mean by morals. I reply that I cannot define, and care not to define. It is man's business to observe, and the definition of moral nature must be the slow result of years, of lives, of states, perhaps of being. Yet in the morning watch on my berth, I thought that morals is the science of the laws of human action as respects right and wrong. Then I shall be asked, and what is right? Right is a conformity to the laws of nature as far as they are known to the human mind. These for the occasion, but I propound definitions with more than the reserve of the feeling above named, with more because my own conceptions are so dim and vague. But nevertheless, nothing darkens, nothing shakes, nothing diminishes my constant conviction of the eternal concord of these laws which are perfect music, and of which every high sentiment and every great action is only a New Testament, and therefore and inasmuch speaks aloud to the whole race of man. I conceive of them by no types, but the apparent hollow sphere of the whole firmament wherein this ball of the earth swims. Not easy are they to be enumerated, but he has some idea of them who considers such propositions as St. Bernard's. Nobody can harm me but myself, or who develops the doctrines in his own experience that nothing can be given or taken without an equivalent. Milton describes himself in his letter to Diodati as enamored of moral perfection. He did not love it more than I. That which I cannot yet declare has been my angel from childhood until now. It has separated me from men. It has watered my pillow. It has driven sleep from my bed. It has tortured me for my guilt. It has inspired me with hope. It cannot be defeated by my defeats. It cannot be questioned, though all the martyrs apostatize. It is always the glory that shall be revealed. It is the quote-unquote open secret of the universe, and it is only the feebleness and dust of the observer that makes it future. The whole is now potentially in the bottom of this heart. It is the soul of religion. Keeping my eye on this, I understand all heroism, the history of loyalty and of martyrdom and of bigotry, the heed of the Methodist, the nonconformity of the disaster, the patience of the Quaker. But what shall the hour say for distinctions such as these, this hour of southwest gales and rain-dripping cabin? As the law of light is, fits of easy transmission, and of reflection, such is also the soul's law. She is only superior at intervals to pain, to fear, to temptation, only in raptures unites herself to God, and Wordsworth truly said, "'Tis the most difficult of tasks to keep heights which the soul is competent to gain." What is this they say about wanting mathematical certainty for moral truths? I have always affirmed they had it, yet they ask me whether I know the soul immortal. No, but do I not know the now to be eternal? Is it not a sufficient reply to the red and angry worldling, coloring as he affirms his unbelief, to say, "Think on living. I have to do no more than you with that question of another life. I believe in this life. I believe it continues. As long as I am here, I plainly read my duties as writ with pencil of fire. They speak not of death. They are woven of immortal thread." Men seem to be constitutionally believers and unbelievers. There is no bridge that can cross from a mind in one state to a mind in the other. All my opinions, affections, whimsies are tinged with belief, inclined to that side. All that is generous, elegant, rich, wise, looks that way. But I cannot give reasons to a persons of a different persuasion that are at all adequate to the force of my conviction. Yet when I fail to find the reason, my faith is not less. Unpalatable must be always the argument based upon the text, "If ye do my Father's will, ye shall know of the doctrines," and almost incapable of being used in conversation. It is felt as a gross personality, yet it is a good topic for the preacher and a better topic for the closet. I believe that virtue purges the eye, that the abstinent, meek, benevolent, industrious man is in a better state for the fine influences of the great universe to act upon him than the cold, idle, eating disputant. The rocky, dry, fallow ground says, "I can produce nothing, nothing will grow, yet I see the sun and feel the rain as much as you." "Ay," replies the cornfield, "but they have plucked away my stones, and turned up my surface, and let in the watercourses, and now the sun and the air, the heat and the snow all serve me." Is it not singular, and not at all unpleasing, the fact that almost all great men have been so yoked together by the accidents of their lives, and few or none stand alone, but all in a genial constellation? John Evelyn gave a pension to Jeremy Taylor. Jeremy Taylor and John Milton both did homage to the same lady, Countess of Carbery, one in his dedication, the other in his comus. Milton and Galileo, Clarke, Butler and Hume, Cervantes and Shakespeare. Sir Henry Wotton was a heap of gold to what a company. Dante died at Ravenna, 1321. 51 years after, Boccaccio was made professor at Florence to lecture upon the Divine Comedy, and in 1351, Boccaccio was sent by the Florentines to Padua to entreat Petrarch to return and end his days in his native city. These are God's mnemonics. Newton was born the year Galileo died. Cuvier, Scott, and Mackintosh were born and died in the same years. It were a good topic for a sermon to preach upon serenity of mind, manners, countenance, according to the sentiment of some pretty verses on Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, verses contained in the Pious Minstrel, and which also have the fine line, quote, Christ's blessing at your heart is warm, and according to the sentiment of Herbert's Verses upon Rest, study to be quiet. And here follows a poem. I will not hesitate to speak the word committed to me. It is not of men. It is not of myself, no vain discourse, empty oration, tinkling, soulless talk. My heart lies open to the universe. I read only what there is writ. I speak the sincere word that's whispered in my ear. I am an organ in the mouth of God, my prophecy the music of his lips. Though harsh and evil years, 'tis harmony to patient, wise, and faithful hearts whose love cooperates with his. Concord of heaven and earth, author divine of what I am and what I say, vouchsafe to cleanse me, that my folly may not hide thy truth, nor my infirmity disguise the omnipotence that animates my clay. Thou, Lord, dost clothe thy attributes with flesh, and named it man, a morning spectacle unto the universe exhibiting a manifold and mystic lesson. Sunday, September 22nd. Gales and headwinds producing all the variety of discomfort and ennui in the cabin. We try in vain to keep bright faces and pleasant occupation below, heedless of the roar of the tempest above. We are too nearly interested in every rope that snaps and every spar that cracks overhead to hear the ruin with philosophy. We may keep our eyes on the Cicero or Addison in our hands, but that noise touches our life. I would I were in the bushes at Canterbury, for my part. Yesterday was too fine a day to lose at sea. Calm, shining after the wild storm of 2 preceding days. This time I have not drawn the golden lot of company, and yet far better than the last voyage. But that little one to Charleston from St. Augustine with Murat was well worth all the rest. Yet thanks to the good God who leads and protects me for the measure of comfort and intellectual occupation that is possible in the valleys of the sea by means of this wonderful chef d'oeuvre of human art, the ship. Sad for the steerage passengers, old women and children sitting up all night or lying in wet berths. The poor cow refuses to get up and be milked, and 4 dogs on board shiver and totter about all day, and bark when we ship a sea. September 25th. It was a good jest which a passenger quoted from a sea song in which 2 sailors in a storm at sea expressed their pity for the poor landsman. Quote, My eyes, what tiles and chimney pots about their heads are flying, whilst you and I are upon the deck, are comfortably lying. It is like the being thankful for the board blanket. What a gale what was on the night of the 19th. The second mate says that if an 18-pounder had been fired on deck, it could not have been heard aloft, and the only way he got the captain's orders was by putting his ear to his mouth. Here follows a sort of letter in verse, probably sent to Edward at Puerto Rico. Dear brother, would you know, sitting under a golden September sun, how we plow the Atlantic wave, under the stars and under the clouds, with swimming deck and sinking shrouds, climbing the steep slope of the cabin floor, or peeping timid into the rain, out of the roundhouse door? Shall I not tell you to kill the time, how we spend the day? Dull the bard and sad the lay. Uneasy rolls the ship, uneven runs the Rhine. Dimly the morning breaks upon the skylight of my birth, where I had dreamed myself at peace, my feet upon my Maker's earth. But the muse doth refuse to recollect these trumpery cares, the waking bell, that tragic knell that calls us back to recognition of our deplorable condition. Out we come, unshaven faces, and with what look forlorn pass the greetings of the morn, each to the other in the well-known places. We climb the gangway, walk the deck, survey the wide horizon round. There's not a sail, there's not a wreck. There's not a wreck, there's not a sail. Nor land, nor waterspout, nor whale. The only living thing, sometimes a gull with snowy wing. A shoal of porpoises come wheeling across the bows through the gray waves, or Mother Carey's chickens stealing on wings that never rest their forlorn food. Poor little wanderers, outcasts of nature, where have you been in the drowning storm? Here is no bush to hide you from whirlwinds, here is no perch to rest your little footies, going away by night and by day, under starlight, under clouds, with swimming deck and singing shrouds. I have read what Shakespeare wrote of bloated Falstaff, royal Lear. There is a dullness proper to great wit, and Johnson hath his ample share of it. It needs much skill to write so dull a piece, draw learned faults from Italy and Greece. That is the end of the poem in verse. Beautiful songs Ben Jonson can write, and his vocabulary is so rich, and when he pleases so smooth, that he seems to be prosing with the design to relieve and display better the bright parts of the piece. Then he shows himself master of the higher, the moral taste, and enriches himself occasionally with those unquestionable gems which none but the sons of God possess. Strange that among his actors, and not the first, is William Shakespeare. He never was dull to relieve his brilliant parts. He is all light, sometimes terrestrial, sometimes celestial, but all light. "Take away that empty marine," said the Duke of York. "What do you mean, sir?" said an officer of marines. "I mean that fellow who has done his duty, and is ready to do it again," replied the Duke. Then there's a quote in French, "Oh, c'est grande magnifique." "That is vat you call pretty well," said Monsieur, arrived in London. Thursday, September 26th, longitude 49, latitude 44. On the banks, found bottom at 49 fathoms, and fished in vain with 70 fathoms of line. Saw a fishing schooner. They fish from June to October. It may take 2 months to get full, and they bring home 20,000 or 25,000 fish. The color of the water has changed. The birds fly about, and we have fogs. Yesterday a little petrel caught in the end of a rope was drowned. Web-footed, a pretty bird with white belt upon the tail. September 29. Storm, 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 but only this can show the virtues of the ship, which behaves well and carries these tender bodies tucked up in boxes along its side without injuring a hair through these wild, cold, savage waters. Strange that anybody who has hands to work should be willing to spend 2 months on that bank exposed to such storms as yesterday's. "That fellow has got a bleak place," said the captain. Much indebted to Mr. H's conversation. Story of the Duc de Bordeaux, infant son of the Duc de Berry, being carried to Louis XVIII. Quote, "Le roi pieux," quote, "La font est raison, ôtez la font," Here follows a short Latin sentence I will attempt to pronounce. Qui pius est, summa philosophator. I notice that we always judge of the length of the passage by the weather of the present moment. Friday, October 4th, longitude 67, Je Croix. Our month expires today, and therefore 'tis time to look for land. The poor Malay saith to the wind in his petulance, "Blow, me do tell you, blow." But not of that mind are we, but contrariwise very glad of this fine weather. Captain's merry account of his capture by pirates in South America in 1822 when they cut up his sails for trousers and ripped off the copper sheathing of the vessel for French horns and appointed him fifer. He played in that capacity the Dead March of two priests, whom the worthy lieutenant general shot for smuggling. Chap from Wigan, Manchester man, and a gentleman from Liverpool, said Coachee. Sea of all colours, today indigo, yesterday grass green, and day before grey. October 8th. My God, who dost animate and uphold us always on the sea and on land, in the fields, in cities, and in lonely places, in our homes and among strangers, I thank thee that thou hast enlightened and comforted and protected me to this hour. Continue to me thy guard and blessing. May I resist the evil that is without by the good that is within. May I rejoice evermore in the consciousness that it is by thee I live. May I rejoice in the divine power and be humble. Oh, that I might show forth thy gift to me by purity, by love, by unshrinking industry and unsinking hope, and by unconquerable courage. May I be more thine, and so more truly myself every day I live. Then there's an editor's note which says, Mr. Emerson landed in New York October 9th, and went by stage to Boston, thence to Newton, Upper Falls, where his mother was living for the time, probably on the farm of Mr. Ladd, who had married the sister of Mr. Emerson's father. Newtown, October 20th. A Sabbath in the country, but not so odoriferous as I have imagined. Mr. B., a plain, serious Calvinist, not winning, but not repelling, one of the useful police which God makes out of the ignorance and superstition of the youth of the world. I do not and wish not to speak disrespectfully of these good, abstemious, laborious men, yet I could not help asking myself how long is the society to be taught in this dramatic or allegorical style? When is religious truth to be distinctly uttered, what it is, not what it resembles? Thus every Sunday, ever since they were born, this congregation have heard tell of salvation, and of going to the door of heaven and knocking, and being answered from within, Depart, I never knew you, and of being sent away to eternal ruin. What hinders that instead of this parable the naked fact be stated to them? Namely, that as long as they offend against their conscience, they will seek to be happy, but they shall not be able. They shall not come to any true knowledge of God. They shall be avoided by good and wise men. They shall become worse and worse. God defend me from ever looking at a man as an animal. God defend me from the vice of my constitution, an excessive desire of sympathy. Let me be content with the consciousness of innocency and the desire of worth, without stretching myself upon the rack whenever any man, woman, or child passes by, until he, she, or it is possessed of my intention. The nine solids. An impulse as irresistible as is the acorn to germinate is in the soul of the prophet to speak. Mr. Blanchard said that labor had kept him well 11 years at the desk. October 21st. I am sure of this, that by going much alone a man will get more of a noble courage in thought and word than from all the wisdom that is in books. He will come to hear God speak as audibly through his own lips as ever he did by the mouth of Moses or Isaiah or Milton. Quote, For nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Such revelations as were made to George Fox or Emanuel Swedenborg are only made in the woods or in the closet. They were no common madmen. They wanted but little, or, if you please, they exceeded but little of being true prophets. E.B.E., which the footnote says is his brother, quotes from St. Pierre the saying that, quote, When the chain is put upon a slave, the other end is riveted round the neck of the master, and sanctions warmly the observation. When a man goes into the woods, he feels like a boy without loss of wisdom. To be sure, a dandy may go there, and nature will never speak to a dandy. It seems to me that the perspective of time, as it sets everything in the right point of view, does the same by Christianity. We learn to look at it now as a part of the history of the world, to see how it rests on the broad basis of man's moral nature, and is not itself that basis. I cannot but think that Jesus Christ will be better loved by being less adored. He has had an unnatural and artificial place for ages in human opinions, a place too high for love. There is a recoil of the affections from all authority and force. To the barbarous state of society, it was thought to add to the dignity of Christ to make him king, to make him God. Now that the Scriptures are read with purged eyes, it is seen that he is only to be loved for so much goodness and wisdom as was in him, which are the only things for which a sound human mind can love any person. As the world waxes wiser, he will be more truly venerated for the splendor of the contrast of his character to the opinions and practices of his age. He will attract the unfeigned love of all to whom moral nature is dear, because he planted himself in the face of the world upon that sole ground, showing that noble confidence in the reality and superiority of spiritual truths, that simplicity, at the same time enthusiasm in declaring them, which is itself one of the highest merits, and gives confidence to all thinkers that come after. But will not this come to be thought the chief value of his teaching, that is, of Christianity, to wit, that it was a great stand made for man's spiritual nature against the sensualism, the forms, and the crimes of the age in which he appeared and those that preceded it? Like every wise and efficient man, he spoke to the men of his time in all their singular peculiarities. His instruction is almost as local, as personal, as would be the teaching in one of our Sunday schools. He speaks as he thinks, but he is thinking for them. Yet such is the extraordinary truth of his mind that his sentences have a fullness of meaning, a fitness to human nature, and an universality of application that has commended them to the whole world. They must be looked upon as one affirmation, proclamation glorious of moral truth, but not as the last affirmation. There shall be 1,000 more. Very inconsistent would it be with a soul so possessed of this love as his to set bounds to that illimitable ocean. None knew better than he that every soul occupies a new position, and that if the stars cannot be counted, nor the sands of the sea, neither can those moral truths be numbered and ended of which the material creation is only the shadow. Newton, October 24th. The teacher of the coming age must occupy himself in the study and explanation of the moral constitution of man than in the elucidation of difficult texts. He must work in the conviction that the Scriptures can only be interpreted by the same Spirit that uttered them, and that as long as the heart and the mind are illumined by a spiritual life, there is no dead letter, but a perpetual Scripture. I expect everything good and auspicious from the studies and the actings of good men in the course this thought shall guide them. It will be inspiration to prophet and to heroes. It will bring the heavens near and show a calm sky always overhead. October 31st. Sir J. Mackintosh has well said that every picture, statue, poem is an experiment on the human mind. And if such slight and transient things often produce in us deepest results, if a paragraph of a newspaper or an eloquent word touch us so to the quick, as now they often do, what may we not expect from a familiar and full comprehension of the amazing discoveries that the naturalists of this day have made, to the wonderful application of polarized light, to the discovery of periodical colors and refrangible substances, and so to the uncovering of nature's primary forms and the secret architecture of bodies, or the great long-expected discovery of the identity of electricity and magnetism lately completed by Dr. Faraday's obtaining the spark from the magnet, and the opening almost a door to the secret mechanism of life and sensation in the relation of the pile of Volta to the electrical fish. November 2nd. Bacon said man is the minister and interpreter of nature. He is so in more respects than one. He is not only to explain the sense of each passage, but the scope and argument of the whole book. He is to explain the attractiveness of all. There is more beauty in the morning cloud than the prism can render account of. There is something in that resembles the respects of mortal life, its epochs and its fate. There is not a passage in the human soul, perhaps not a shade of thought, but has its emblem in nature. And this does not become fainter, this undersong, this concurrent text, with more intimate knowledge of nature's law, but the analogy is felt to be deeper and more universal for every law that is revealed. It almost seems as if an unknown intelligence in us expressed its recognition of each new disclosure. Let a man under the influence of strong passion go into the fields, and see how readily every thought clothes itself with a material garment. Is it not illustration to us of the manner in which every spirit clothes itself with a body? Now I say, is it not time that something was done to explain this attractiveness which the face of nature has for us, renewed this second day of November of the 6,000th year of the world, as it has been every day of the 6,000 years, to the reality of which every age has testified? Nature is a new language, and every new fact that we learn is a new world. But rightly seen, taken all together, it is not merely a language, but the language put together into a most significant and universal book. I wish to learn the language, not that I may learn a new set of nouns and verbs, but that I may read the great book which is written in that tongue. The glutton wrote for his epitaph, quote, "What I have eat is mine, in words my fill I've had, and of my lust have taken my fill." End quote. Crates, the philosopher, altered it for himself. Quote, "What I have learned is mine. I have had my thought, and me the muses noble truths have taught." End quote. To an instructed eye the universe is transparent. The light of higher laws than its own shines through it. New Bedford, November 19th. Stubler said the difference between Brother Witherley's preaching and his was this. Brother W. said, "If you do not become good, you shall be whipped," and himself said, "If you will become good, you shall not be whipped." Wrote to Charles yesterday of the amount of meaning in life. Dum tacit clamet. He would feel it if he should suppose Shakespeare should go with him to Mr. Peabody's or Aunt Cook's. If a susceptible man should lay bare his heart, it would show theories of life, thoughts of unutterable tenderness, and visions of beauty that were suggested from the most seemingly inadequate and mean occasions, from hearing an unwashed boy spell or cipher in his class, or seeing the blush upon the cheek of a schoolgirl, or watching the transmission of the candlelight through his closed fingers, or listening long to the sound made by a tinkling glass tumbler, or touching the key of a piano. Is it not true that no persons meet, of what inequality whatsoever, but a quick apprehension can straightway bridge over the distance between them, and see how they may stand in most strict and amiable relations? The following is called Quaker Conversations. Quote, "Thomas, I know what thee is thinking of," end quote. Quote, "If you do, Micah, you don't feel flattered," end quote. Quote, "Mary, it has been revealed to me that I should marry thee," end quote. Quote, "Abner, when it is revealed to me, I will tell thee," end quote. Quote, "William, I am sent to tell thee thou hast a divided heart," end quote. I much regret that in all my sauntering in London streets, where I suppose I felt much like an English boy on his first visit from the country, the names were so familiar and the things so new, yet tallying so well with their great pictures, I did not chance upon Great Cheyenne Row, Chelsea, for I should gladly know all, even to the peach-colored doublet. The bounds of friendship, where are they? The good soul meekly defies all the angels to strip it of its state and reputation, and can even make the pure beam permeate the meanness of man's state and behold it as a god. Put gentle charitable hands under the faults, as separate as is every loathed symptom of a diseased friend from the friend. It transmutes blood to ichor and transubstantiates flesh. Will God grant me your society? Fear not that I am to eat up your time. You shall make your own laws, and idler as I am, I have mine. I feel assured that though I am searching in a mind not quickly exhausted, say boldly, inexhaustible, for though talent is finite, character is not, and who has that great spiritual force from God, which we denominate character, is endlessly study, surprise, solace, and support, I do not know 7 in the world. Quote, "It is not permitted to a man to corrupt himself for the sake of mankind," end quote. Rousseau. Quote, who is discreet is seldom betrayed, Bulwer. Quote, character is the only rank, principle is a passion for truth, Hazlitt. The old jail in Cambridge was immediately back of Mr. Nealon's house. The inmates of the prison were very bad neighbors, and used to delight in pestering Mrs. Nealon with foul names and profane language. Professor Hedge took great pains to get the nuisance removed, and at last the old jail was pulled down. Someone congratulated Mrs. K. upon the happy deliverance, but found her quite sad at the loss of her stimulus. Quote, she kind o' missed 'em, she said. Wise moments are years, and light the countenance ever. They are the good moments. They do not belong to genius, but to man. They refuse to be recorded. The suicide is beside himself, yet is his act no more unreasonable than the thief's or the fop's. Old tree in the common, circumference 24 feet at base, 17 at 6 feet from ground. I will not refer, defer, confer, prefer, differ. I renounce the whole family of furor. I remember absolute life. I nor you can feel the chain that draws us together. Perhaps continents, tongues, ages intervene. A prejudice may be an age, and yet all be nothing against that strong sympathy. Tuesday, December 10th. Took possession of my chamber at Mr. Pellitier's. Boston, December 11th. The call of our callings is the loudest call. There are so many worthless lives, apparently, that to advance a good cause by telling one anecdote or doing one great act seems a worthy reason for living. When a poor man thanked Richard Reynolds for his goodness, he said, do you thank the clouds for rain? The elder Scipio said he had given his enemies as much cause to speak well of him as his friends. Fontenelle said, I am a Frenchman. I am 60 years old, and I have never treated the smallest virtue with the smallest ridicule. December 14th. I please myself with contemplating the felicity of my present situation. May it last. It seems to me singularly free, and it invites me to every virtue and to great improvement. Quote, in being silent and hoping consisteth our strength. So Luther quotes Isaiah. For every gift of noble origin is breathed upon by hope's perpetual breath. Wordsworth. Alexander gave away the conquered provinces. And what have you left for yourself? Hope, replied the hero. How do the wise differ from the unwise? Was the question put to Bias. He replied, in a good hope. It is the true heroism and the true wisdom, hope. The wise are always cheerful. The reason is, and it is a blessed reason, that the eye sees that the ultimate issues of all things are good. There is always a presumption in favor of a cheerful view. Here's a short insertion from the editor which states, here follow some notes on hints taken by engineers and architects from nature, printed in Art, Society, and Solitude. My children, said my grandfather, you will never see anything worse than yourselves. Why can we find a spiritual meaning in every natural fact? The young bee, up to the time he leaves the hive, has never seen light. Yet he launches at once into the air, flies far from home, wanders to many flowers, yet comes back with unerring certainty to the hive. Who pilots him? December 19th. The moral of your piece should be cuneiform and not polygonal. Judge of the success of the piece by the exclusive prominence it gives to the subject in the minds of all the audience. A short insertion from the editor. The following, probably written in 1833, are from a smaller notebook. The first philosophy, that of mind, is the science of what is in distinction from what appears. It is one mark of its laws that their enunciation awakens the feeling of the moral sublime, and great men are they who believe in them. They resemble great circles in astronomy, each of which, in what direction soever it be drawn, contains the whole sphere. So each of these seems to imply all truth. These laws are ideas of the reason, and so are obeyed easier than expressed. They astonish the understanding, and seem to it gleams of a world in which we do not live. Our compound nature differences us from God, but our reason is not to be distinguished from the divine essence. We have yet devised no words to designate the attributes of God which can adequately stand for the universality and perfection of our own intuitions. To call the reason ours or human seems an impertinence, so absolute and unconfined it is. The best we can say of God, we mean of the mind as it is known to us. Thus, when you say, quote, "The gods approve the depth, but not the tumult of the soul, a fervent, not ungovernable love," end quote. The sublime in the sentiment is that to the soul itself, depth, not tumult, is desirable. When you say, "Socrates said it, Jupiter prefers integrity to charity," your finest meaning is the soul prefers, etc. When Jesus saith, "Who giveth one of these little ones a cup of cold water shall not lose his reward," is not the best meaning the love at which the giver has arrived? And so on throughout the New Testament, there is not a volition attributed to God considered as an external cause, but gains in truth and dignity by being referred to the soul. Reason, seeing in objects their remote effects, affirms the effect as the permanent character. The understanding, listening to reason on the one side, which says it is, and to the senses on the other side, which say it is not, takes middle ground and declares it will be. Heaven is the projection of the ideas of reason on the plane of the understanding. Jesus Christ was a minister of the pure reason. The Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount are all utterances of the mind contemplating the phenomenal world. Blessed are the righteous poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men revile you, etc. The understanding can make nothing of it. 'Tis all nonsense. The reason affirms its absolute verity. Various terms are employed to indicate the counteraction of the reason and the understanding with more or less precision, according to the cultivation of the speaker. A clear perception of it is the key to all theology, and a theory of human life. St. Paul marks the distinction by the terms natural man and spiritual man. When Novalis says, "It is the instinct of the understanding to counteract the reason," he only translates into a scientific formula the sentence of St. Paul, "The carnal mind is enmity against God." The mind is very wise, could it be roused into action, but the life of most men is aptly signified by the poet's personification, death and life. We walk about in a sleep. A few moments in the year, or in our lifetime, we truly live. We are at the top of our being, we are pervaded, yea, dissolved by the mind, but we fall back again presently. Those who are styled practical men are not awake, for they do not exercise the reason, yet their sleep is restless. The most active lives have so much routine as to preclude the progress almost equally with the most inactive. We bow low to the noted merchants whose influence is felt, not only in their native cities, but in most parts of the globe. But our respect does them and ourselves great injustice, for their trade is without system, their affairs unfold themselves after no law of the mind, but are bubble built upon bubble without end, a work of arithmetic, not of commerce, much less of humanity. They add voyage to voyage, and buy stocks, that they may buy stocks, and no ulterior purpose is thought of. When you see their dexterity in particulars, you cannot overestimate the resources of good sense, and when you find how empty they are of all remote aims, you cannot underestimate their philosophy. The man of letters puts the same cheat upon us, bestirring himself immensely to keep the secret of his littleness. He spins his most seeming surface directly before the eye to conceal the universe of his ignorance. To what end his languages, his correspondence, his academic discourses, his printed volumes? Newton said that if this porous world were made solid, it would lie in a nutshell. All our writings are variations of one air. Books, for the most part, are such expedients as his who makes an errand for the sake of exercise. And for the sincere great men, the wisest passages they have writ, the infinite conclusions to which they owe their fame, are only confessions. Throughout their works the good ear hears the undersong of confession and amazement, the apothegm of Socrates, the recantation of man. Such is the inaction of men. We have an obscure consciousness of our attributes. We stand on the edge of all that is great, yet are restrained in inactivity and unconscious of our powers, like neuters of the hive, every one of which is capable of transformation into the queen bee. We are always on the brink, etc. Much preparation, little fruit. But suddenly in any place, in the street, in the chamber, will the heavens open and the region of wisdom be uncovered, as if to show how thin the veil, how null the circumstances. As quickly a Lethean stream washes through us and bereaves us of ourselves. What a benefit if a rule could be given whereby the mind dreaming amid the gross fogs of matter could at any moment cast itself and find the sun! But the common life is an endless succession of phantasms, and long after we have deemed ourselves recovered and sound, light breaks in upon us, and we find we have yet had no sane hour. Another morn rises on mid-noon. Legenda. Article, quote, Croker's, Boswell's, Johnson, end quote, in Edinburgh Review. Essays on Pursuit of Truth. Hazlitt's Essays on Principles of Human Action. Hobbes's Treatise on Human Nature. Hume's Dissertation on the Passions and Inquiry. Shaftesbury's Inquiry. Sir Charles Bell's Animal Mechanics. Sir Samuel Romilly's article on quote-unquote codification, Hartley. Tucker's chapter on quote-unquote pleasure and Paley's on quote-unquote happiness. Cousin's translation of Tennemann. Turner's Elements of Chemistry, Affinity. Authors or books quoted or referred to in Journal of 1833. Homer, Cicero, Petrarch, Montaigne, Sir Henry Wotton, George Herbert, Verses upon Rest. This is the end of Ralph Waldo Emerson's journal collection number 24. In the next video, we will of course begin with journal collection number 25, which begins in January of 1834, and Emerson is at that time 30 years old. Thank you for listening.